If you've ever tried to configure an agent framework like Crew AI, AutoGen, or LangChain, or you're trying to design a workflow of GPTs that solve a specific business problem, you might be wondering, is there a simple instruction language that you can use to configure or come up with these designs? This is the third video in the developing an agent workflow builder software. And before I even started developing this software, I came up with this agent as code sort of idea. What I needed was a simple instruction set that I could generate workflows quickly. So let's start by talking about DSLs, or domain-specific languages. And if you've ever used something like Terraform, then you've come across a DSL, which is sometimes called infrastructure as code. And if we look at a scenario here of deploying a scalable web application, you can see there's a bunch of tasks that would need to be done to deploy that application. Now, you could go onto something like Amazon Web Services and use the configuration screens, but you can also turn that into code. And here's an example of what the code might look like. So it says that the provider is Amazon Web Services. We've got a bunch of resources that we need to set up, and then you just continue on. You've got security groups, EC2 instances, databases. Now, if you ran this script, you could automatically deploy and provision your scalable web server, but you might also want to visualize it. And if you would visualize it, you might want to see it in some sort of graphic. And this is the problem I'm trying to solve using agent as code. So when I'm releasing a YouTube video, I go through this workflow, and the last thing I do is I create some social media posts. I've got the YouTube metadata that I need. I create a title and a thumbnail for the video. I'm analyzing content, building the chapters that you see in the description on the video, and preparing the video right at the beginning. And all of this is part of the YouTube launch optimizer. And as far as agents go, it's made up of 22 different steps. There's 33 data points that I'm collecting along the way, 21 prompts, and 6 different phases. These are the phases that you're seeing here. Now let's do a bit of an overview of the agent as code setup that I've got here. So you can see I've got this agent creation node, and I've called it YouTube Launch Optimizer, and it tells us what it's about. This workflow optimizes video launches by analyzing, preparing, and generating content for various places. This is how I release a lot of my videos onto social media and any other writing that I need to do. And what that looks like, this whole process, is right here. We've got the YouTube Launch Optimizer with a bunch of sections, attributes, and prompts. So as we move through this, we can see there's a couple of settings that are in place for where are we going to put the prompts and what's the default large language model we want to work. Now, when I want to make changes to this, I just make the changes and save the file and everything kicks in. So let's say the YouTube Launch Optimizer is not the name we want, and instead we want to go with something like YouTube Post-Production. What I do is I press save, and it's kicked off some processes and changed the title here to YouTube Post-Production. So if I undo that and hit save, we're back to Launch Optimizer. And the good thing about this is that you're seeing a visualization from the agents as code, but this could be configured to produce outputs for, say, LangChain or Crew AI. So let's come back to the domain-specific language, and we can see we've got a bunch of prompts. Now, according to this number here, we've got 21 prompts, and you can see them all listed when you click on the prompts menu, and they're all loaded into the visualization tool right here. The next thing we see is a bunch of attributes that I'm collecting along the way, and those attributes are being configured as strings or integers or whatever they're needed to be, keeping in mind that large language models will only work with strings anyway. But I have the concept of types so that I can configure the interface to limit the sort of values that come in. Now, because this is a section, when we get to the last point in the section, we can go down to the next phase. And if we scroll down here, this should be the building of the chapters. This is how I do the chapters in my YouTube description. So the first thing I do is, using a transcript that I type in and an abridgment, I go and track down or identify the potential headings and what was said at the time. From that, I'm moving through and refining it, and then ultimately creating the chapters in a format that's probably listed right here. And we can see these prompts back at the top by navigating to the create chapters prompt, and the way that looks is it's just a text file that I can alter. We'll just put in XYZ right here. We'll hit save on that and we'll hit save. Our prompt has been updated to reflect what the configuration is. Now, if you're actually interested in seeing the repositories around this code, I'll leave a link in the description. Keep in mind, this is a pre-alpha release. This is me eating my own dog food and using these applications. They're not ready for anyone to actually use, but you can have a look at the code. What I thought we'd do is create a workflow from scratch, and we'll work with law and order. See, law is something I know nothing about, so I don't know what we're going to end up at the end of this. And search engine optimization. So if you were a media agency dealing with legal, this might be the sort of workflow you want to work. So let's head over to the agent builder, and I've come to something called the agent workflow architect, and we'll use this to create our new workflow. And I've clicked on the workflow objective, and I need a goal and an idea. What I've done is just typed in an idea. I've called it SEO agency for law and compliance. I've said a workflow for SEO agents that specializes in content marketing for lawyers and statutory compliance field. I don't know whether any of this makes sense, but this is the sort of stuff that I would come across if I had to deal with a new client in law and order and I want to do SEO sort of work. These are the sort of simple statements I can come up with, and we can just press copy. This prompt has been merged with these input parameters, and we can just see them down here. We can see the workflow idea and the goal. And we can simply head over to GPT at the moment and just paste the information in and see what sort of overview it thinks we need. So we've got this overview is designed for an SEO agency specializing in content marketing for lawyers focused on statutory compliance. There's a bunch of other information going in here. Now, you might be wondering, why did I use ChatGPT and not use the agent builder? Because the agent builder actually has a button called start, which would then work with whatever large language model. But this is a proof of concept application, so that sort of stuff isn't working yet. So what I've done is I've selected all the information, copied it, headed back to the workflow tool, and we'll just move on to the next one, which is listing the steps that you might want in a workflow. So we're just going to paste the information in right there, press the copy button, come back to ChatGPT, paste it in, and see what sort of steps it thinks we need. Now we've got a list of items, identify key compliance topics, legal keywords. This is all making sense. We could have a conversation with the GPT to expand on it, but for now we're just going to copy it and head over to the next step, which is about organizing the steps into some sort of hierarchy that might happen in an SEO agency. So we're clicking here and we've got these research and planning, content creation, and optimization and publishing. I've just put in this statement to get rid of the phase 1, 2, and 3. I don't think that's very relevant for us. And we'll press copy and just move on to the next step. What would be useful is, how do you name these workflows? So do you name them based on their function? Or do you use something cutesy? Because imagine an agent workflow as being like a staff member or a team member that solves a problem. We might have legal Leon, compliance Christina, but here we'll just go with a practical name. We'll press copy and we'll see what we're ultimately going to call this workflow. And we could play around with this, but I like either the compliance content marketing strategy or the SEO for legal compliance. If I move into the last step, this is the specification. So this is hooking everything up. So I'm just going to put in this. We've got the list of organized steps. What we're trying to do now is figure out what are the inputs for each step and what are the outputs and how do they all flow together. And that's what the specification is about. So we'll come back to our GPT and I've just pasted in everything. It's got an example of what this should look like. And we're ending up with these phase names: research and planning, content creation, optimization and publishing. We've got different steps going on. We've got descriptions. And if we move over to the right, we should have the inputs and the outputs. So for the first identified topics, we've got an input of some legal documents and current trends. The output is compliance topics. The input for the next one, it is the compliance topics from the output here, plus some search data. Now this may not be right, this doesn't get it fully right, but I use it as a starting point. So we're just going to press copy on that. So our agent as code for SEO and legal compliance is ready to go. If I was to press save, we should get a new static page created using Astro. So at the moment it currently says SEO for legal compliance is not available. Now I have links in the description below around how I created the initial agent static proof of concept and then how I made it more dynamic, which is what we've been using today using the minimum viable product. But what I'll do now is just hit save. And when we come back, we should be able to refresh. We're looking at the visual user interface compared to the agent as code. We can see that it's called SEO for legal compliance, which is matching the name that we created. There's also a URL to it. The description is in the agent as code, but I haven't visualized it in the user experience. Then if we go to settings, we've got a location for the prompts and we've got a default large language model. So we can head over to settings and they've been filled in. The next thing we've got are the prompts, and if we click on prompts, we can see all the prompts. Now the prompts are not filled in with any information because I haven't done that part of updating them in the files. In the SaaS application that I'm building, this will all be stored in a database. If we scroll down, we can see the attributes that have been set up, and these are the data points that we're collecting, and we can see that by clicking here, and we've got the list of data points in this place with some of them filled in as I started through this. So I'm just going to clear one of those out. I'm going to keep this one and head over to the overview. So with the overview, we'll click on identify topics. That was the first thing that was thought of with SEO for compliance. And we've got agent workflows filled in, and I'm also going to put in some legal documents. So let's say you've got this legal document AAA, and we'll put in a space and we'll just repeat that many times. So this is coming in probably from a PDF document. What you can see here that I've put in a prompt that says tell me more about the current trends, which would be agent workflows. The legal documents are showed, and then we go make sure you give me the current stats on current trends again. And if we open up the interpolated prompt, we can see those values being loaded in various locations. Now the other thing we can see is that we've got 3 different steps going on for the research and planning. And so as we move through our agent of code, we've got section research and planning, identify topics. The input is current trends or legal documents. The prompt is identify topics. So that would be read in from up here, one of the files. And then lastly, there'd be an output, which is compliance topics. Now, if I was to add in another one, we'll just put in ABC just as an example, and we'll see that there's a new output attribute called ABC, because the goal of this sort of tooling is that we should be able to give one or more inputs and get one or more outputs in various formats, such as just raw text, rich text, markdown, copy, JSON, all the sorts of data formats that you might want for more automated sort of workflows. Now that you've seen how DSLs can streamline your YouTube launch strategy, imagine taking that efficiency to the next level. What if you could achieve 4,000 watch hours faster than ever before? So drop a comment down below and like and subscribe, because in the next video we'll reveal advanced techniques to maximize your workflow's impact and get those watch hours rolling in no time.